Reddit, what is your r/no-sleep story that actually happened? Copying this from an old post under an old profile I no longer use, new edition is in italics at the bottom. I'm not much of a storyteller, and this isn't as creepy as some of the stuff I've read here in r/no-sleep, but it was the first experience since finding this place that made me want to share. My 21-month-old daughter has never been a good sleeper. No matter what we try, she rarely sleeps through the night. We've set up 2 night lights, a regular one across the room and behind her little dresser and a red one by her bed. She's in the ballpark of where fear of the dark and imagination can manifest, and we were trying to get ahead of it. The last couple of weeks, she's been waking up and acting completely frantic, crying in a way that she doesn't normally cry. If I try to leave her alone, she doesn't just cry, no, she sounds absolutely terrified, and it's not her normal scared cry. 3 nights ago, I was woken up by the sound of a pig snort at 2 different times. You might say that I woke myself up snoring, but my wife and I do not snore unless we are congested, and that's not the case at the moment. It was an odd thing, but I simply went back to sleep. I point this out because my daughter has started making pig snorts. She has a little stuffed pig, but we haven't been teaching her that noise. 2 nights ago, we were woken up around 12 a.m. by her cries on the monitor. I went into her room. The red light that was on when we put her to sleep was unplugged from the wall. I tried to get her back down, but she wasn't having it. She kept looking over my shoulder. The door to her room is across the room and was behind my back, but she wasn't looking at it, rather she was looking at the glider, a kind of rocking chair, in her room. I looked back at it and, for the briefest of moments, I swore that I saw a shadow move from the light of her normal night light back into the shadows. It's 2 a.m. and my mind is playing tricks on me, I said to myself, half out loud. I said it out loud because of the feeling slowly washing over me, the feeling that something was there, unseen eyes watching me. It made me uncomfortable, powerless. I haven't really felt that feeling since living with a friend of mine, and encountering an aggressive entity that resided there. I tried to play it off and asked my daughter, "Is there someone here?" It's one of the few things that she will clearly says. "Where are they?" There was no one in the room with us. She pointed at the corner, where the glider is. We keep it locked because we rarely use it, so I knew it wouldn't be moving. I still looked in that direction. "There's no one there, sweetie. Are you sure?" I was hoping she'd shake her head no. Okie dokie. Put her head down on Daddy's shoulder. I was patting her back, half to comfort her and half to comfort me. She patted my shoulder back. She put her head down and we swayed for a few minutes, but she wasn't closing her eyes. She was watching the glider. I waited a few more minutes and asked, "Is someone still here?" "Where are they?" She pointed to the same place. This time, something caught my eye that I'd completely overlooked before. Her stuffed pig was on the floor next to the glider. She looked absolutely terrified. She slept with us that night. Last night, she cried, but wasn't pacing in her crib. I went in to check on her and the red light was again unplugged. I rubbed her back and told her everything would be okay. She fell back asleep. She does make the cutest, content noises when she's sleeping well. Well, I thought she was sleeping well. I went to leave the room and she'd start crying. She was fidgeting, which was abnormal for her. She's normally a fairly still sleeper, like I am. She was sleeping on her stomach, which was normal, but she was keeping her hands tucked under her body. Normally she sleeps with them out, like a typical toddler/baby sleeps when on their belly. I moved her arm out and she quickly tucked it back in. We did this back and forth thing with me rubbing her back, walking away, and her waking up for about 20 minutes. I started to walk away for the last time, so certain she was asleep. Dada? I turned to see her pointing at the glider, which was illuminated by the night light. Nothing was there, but the lever was in the unlocked position. I started to get lightheaded and my chest started to tighten. My legs felt like lead. I started to hear a distinct buzzing sound in my head. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was adrenaline, maybe it was something that I have no idea about. I willed myself to move, grabbed my daughter, and took her into our room. Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep last night. We ended up selling the glider to clear up some space in her room. Once we sold that, however, my daughter started sleeping in her room. After most of her life sleeping in our bed and then on a pallet on our floor, it took 3 nights for her to sleep in her room. This is for my parents. I was about 3 years old, and it was way past my bedtime. But I was restless, and I snuck out of my bed and made my way to the living room. where my parents were watching a documentary about World War II. I remember hearing things like Hitler and Luftwaffe and Messerschmitt. Now, to a child, toddler who had a trouble enunciating hard consonants, those words were actually very easy to replicate and sound out. Then I heard my parents talking to each other, idly wondering if the pilots all bought into that evil bad man Hitler's lies, and how some of the pilots felt if they had a conscience at all. Anyways, the next day, I drew a crude plane on a piece of paper, and was making airplane noises like I had overheard on TV. According to my mother, I never had expressed any interest in planes, had no exposure to planes before, at least, not to her knowledge. So she was curious why I would suddenly draw a plane out of the blue. It's my plane. Oh, it's your plane? Yeah. My plane. It's Messerschmitt. What? Messerschmitt, Mama. I was in the Luftwaffe. Honey, where did you hear those words? I wanted to do good, but Hitler made me bad. Then I had to go away for a while, but now I'm here. Anyways, for years my parents were convinced that I was a reincarnated soul of a World War II German pilot. It wasn't until fairly recently that I had a random recall of the whole thing and told my parents. Everyone was very amused. I was at my uncle's apartment and this rustling, scratching sound started. I figured it was some animal outside and waited for it to stop. It did, but it'd start back up every 15 minutes. Then I became convinced that it was in the room with me. I walked around the room, and looked in all the corners and couldn't find anything, so I said fuck it. It's just a poltergeist, and ended up getting about 30 minutes of sleep total that night since the noise never stopped. In the morning, he asks how I slept. I said I didn't because of the weird scratching noise. He pulls a hedgehog from behind the TV. Edit: Hedgehog was in a glass tank behind the TV. I missed the part about the uncle, and thought the poltergeist pulled a hedgehog out from behind the TV. That is a much better story. I work night shift as a palliative care right now in a very big, very old nursing home. It's important to note that this home, and the religious organization that ran it, are currently part of the Royal Inquiry into the institutional response to the abuse of children. The nurses that had worked there for 30+ years, used to delight in telling younger staff that when it was used as a children's home, they used to bury children that died in the rose garden. This old rose garden was apparently under a newer wing of the home. At least 4 times in my 2 years of working there we would have elderly, close to death patients wake, totally lucid in the dead of night and ask us please tell the little girl to get out of my room or please get that little boy out of the corner, he's looking at me. Being in this huge, dark, old, creepy building that had a very awful history and then that happening? Fuck that, I would never do my rounds alone when it happened, it was terrifying. It made my blood run cold and I'd get a friend to work with me the rest of the night. I was not the only person this happened to, either. It was a regular occurrence. Sleep paralysis story incoming. Before I experienced it myself, I honestly thought people had been exaggerating how absolutely terrifying it is. I must have been pretty close to having a heart attack, at least that's what it felt like. Bit of relevant background, it happened when I'd been having insomnia. I was sleeping at like 7 AM to 4 PM as I just couldn't sleep. Anyway, the heating man had to come over to do something with the radiators, as we were having a new boiler installed. I was sleeping in my mom's room as the old boiler was in mine, and she thought I wouldn't be as disturbed. Anyway, I was briefly woken up by the guy turning on the radiator, which made a sound like steam being released. Next thing I know it's morphed into this demonic scream, and this shadow thing emerges from above the bed behind me, grabs me from behind around my chest and pulls me to the bed. I can feel this thing squeezing my chest and the pain was indescribable. I tried screaming for my mom but my voice was just a wisp. One of the creepiest experiences of my life. We moved into a new house a few months ago. As we were in the process of purchasing the house, the renter who was living in it died unexpectedly of natural causes in his mid-40s. He died right in the middle of the living room. Shortly after, we move into the house, and almost immediately, our 2-year-old daughter starts talking about the ghost that lives in our house. Now let's be real here, she is 2 and 2-year-olds are very impressionable. Halloween had recently passed, and she had this Halloween-themed picture book that she loved to read, so it's entirely possible that all this talk of ghosts was just coming from looking through that book on a regular basis. Still, she was always telling me that the ghost was in her playhouse in the basement, or that the ghost was on the stairs, or that the ghost was standing in the corner. She never seemed to be afraid of the ghost, and considered him to be her friend, so I wasn't all that concerned even if there really was a ghost haunting our house. If he's a nice and helpful ghost, It could certainly be a lot worse. I would often tell the ghost that he was welcome to stay if he wanted to, but he was also welcome to go if that would make him happier. I was about 30-70 on the ghost being real, and she could see and talk to him, versus the ghost being just her imagination fueled by her Halloween book. Until one day, when we were going out to the car to go to daycare in the morning. It was still dark out, and rainy. My daughter told me that the ghost was on the back deck, and then she told me that today was the ghost's birthday, and she wanted to sing him happy birthday. Once again, I mostly disregarded what she was saying, as she is birthday obsessed and has in the past made us sing happy birthday to Mickey Mouse, a bowl of fruit snacks, and the bathroom. So we sang and wished the ghost a happy birthday and went on with our lives. Later that day, out of pure curiosity, I looked up the obituary of the man who had died in our house. And wouldn't you know it? It was his freaking birthday. I posted this before, but it's one of my family's favorite stories. My uncle called my mom one morning and told her this. I have 4 little cousins who never got to meet my grandfather. He passed before they were born. One morning, they ran downstairs for breakfast as they usually do. As my uncle was getting their food ready, one pointed to the fridge and said, "That's him." My uncle, not thinking much of it, said, "Who?" and looked over. They were pointing at a picture of my grandfather, that they never got to meet. My cousin responded, "The man that comes and talks to us at night, until we fall asleep sometimes." Not horrifying, but still, eerie. I had a very similar experience, happened to me directly. I'll keep it short. My great-grandfather passed away when I was 5, and so as it was just my mom and I after her divorce, she took me up to Leeds to attend the funeral with her. Both of us were upset and so we slept in the same bed, as Mum felt heartbroken and I was just upset, though never was one as a child to share my parents' bed, just this one occasion. Fast forward to the very early hours of the day of the funeral, around 3 a.m. and, although I don't remember doing it, my mum says I say bolt upright in bed, wide awake, and started talking to someone. She didn't dare interrupt, even though it freaked her out loads, and just lay there in bed listening to me talk to my great-grandmother, who had passed away in 1981, 14 years before I was born. Yeah, this is exactly what I want to be reading at 3 a.m., in my bed. In Leeds. I've posted this before in a similar thread. For reference, this happened a few months ago. Like most couples, my husband and I have a designated side of the bed. I sleep on the right and him on the left. My comfortable sleep position is laying on my left side and facing the window, away from him. He alternates between facing the bathroom door or me. One night a few weeks back, I'm fighting my sleep. I'm laying on my left side, per the norm, but I just can't get comfortable. My neck is sort of sore from laying on my left, so I turn over and face my husband. When I turn over, I am not only faced with my husband's back, but with a large shadow standing over him. Immediately the shadow stretches to me and somehow communicates for me to turn over. I remember thinking its face was contorted, somehow expressing malice, but I can't for the life of me remember what it looked like. I didn't hear a voice, but the communication was urgent and angry. Like it wanted to hurt me. Without thinking, I turn back around and quickly fall asleep. To be honest, I'm not even sure if I was dreaming. The next morning, my husband and I wake up around the same time and go about our usual routine. I don't say anything because my husband doesn't like to talk about supernatural stuff or the like, which I felt it was. However, this morning is strange and he seems to be uncomfortable. After a lot of prodding, he finally admits he had an awful nightmare. He dreamt a demon was trying to make him do things while he was sleeping, really evil shit, wouldn't elaborate, and I woke up during this and the demon attacked me. I didn't tell my husband that I remember the same thing, only I wasn't sure if I was asleep. TLDR, turned over to face my husband while sleeping, which I never do. Demon shadow got in my face and communicated that I should turn around. I did. Next morning husband has same dream but demon was telling him to hurt me/attack me. Edit. Okay, some of the recurring questions here, particularly about the sleep position. Trying to explain it best way I can, since I'm at work and can't draw a picture. When entering the room, you will see the bed against the wall, facing where you entered. The bathroom door is on the left side of the room and the window is on the right side of the room, from your perspective. Walk up to the foot of the bed and you are standing over us sleeping. My husband is laying on the right side of his body sleeping, facing the bathroom, and I am sleeping on my left side, so I face the window. I'm speaking from my perspective when referencing my right and my left. I'm sorry if this confused anyone. Another thing. Without thinking, I turn back around and quickly fall asleep. There was a comment that I should have saved my husband. When this occurred, I honestly felt like I was dreaming. I saw the shadow, but it felt so surreal I assumed it wasn't there. Plus, I don't remember seeing its face, just remember feeling the angry presence. And I fell back asleep so quickly, which never happens if I actually open my eyes and look around. I don't remember voluntarily just turning over, it was automatic. So of course, I didn't just leave my husband to fend for himself. Honestly, if I thought it was real, I would have at least screamed or woke my husband up, which may or may not have had bad consequences. Other comments on sleep paralysis? Maybe. I've never had anything like this happen before. Maybe it was a weird coincidence of SP on my behalf and an awful nightmare on my husband's. Maybe we're that psychologically linked. This was overall a terrifying one-time experience in my life. It did leave me uncomfortable and anxious a few days after. I didn't sleep well for a night or three after, but when it never returned I began to write it off. My husband and I never spoke about it after that morning. TBH, it does feel that if we ignore it, it will go away. If you believe me, thank you. If you don't believe me, even better, hopefully that'll help you sleep tonight. It's not something I would like to experience ever again. Not only because of the fear but because of my awful feelings afterward. I work in a small building with 3 wings, and my office is located in a little back hallway of one of the wings. I share the office with another girl and it's usually pretty quiet. One evening she and I were the only ones in our wing still there, and we both heard a door loudly shut in the hallway. We were both a bit confused and, upon peeking out, I noticed nothing out of the ordinary. The next 2 weeks, I was staying really late to catch up on hours, so I could have a winter break, and I began noticing little noises in the hallway when I was positive nobody was in the building. It sounded like a shoe sliding on the floor. This happened a couple of times. Earlier in the evenings it would just be me and the janitor, and she started getting really spooked. She said she heard doors slamming in one of the wings, even though everybody had left. We investigated one night to find that all of the doors were properly locked, but I noticed that the kitchen light was on, even though the door was locked. The janitor freaked out, because she knew she turned the light off before locking the door. I also recalled the light being on a couple of nights when I was the only one there. I started to ask around if other people in the building had experienced anything weird like that, and one lady said some of her room decorations would have moved when she came back from the bathroom. And here's the one that really creeps me out. Another lady said that one day she noticed a footprint in the middle of her desk. It's that black material that shows skin prints pretty easily. To be honest, I'd rather it be paranormal stuff, because the idea that there's a person doing all this really creeps me out. TLDR, a mild white-collar paranormal activity. My daughter slept in the bed with me for a few years, after her father and I had divorced. Probably ages 3 through 6 or so. My bed was against the wall, and she slept on the side of the wall. I slept on my side facing her, so my bathroom was to my back. We had not fallen asleep yet, but had just been laying there being quiet and still. All of a sudden, she says, "Mommy, why is there a man standing behind you?" My body turned ice cold, and it felt like all of the blood drained out of my body. I finally got up the nerve to turn over and look. There was nobody there. She had said it so seriously, but the little toot was totally joking. I have never been so scared in my life, and to this day I will not sleep with my back facing that bathroom door. This was 13 years ago. And that is exactly why I do not want children. I worked the graveyard shift in a hospital kitchen about 5 years ago. Before the kitchen was renovated a few years prior, our dish room used to be part of the morgue. While I was training, I'd frequently feel like someone was watching me, especially when I crossed into that part of the hallway. Every time I went into the dish room, something would be moved, turned over, or missing. Assuming it was my coworker, I didn't think anything of it. About a week later, my coworker leaves, and I'm left on my own. Every night, I would hear carts being moved around, dishes being put away, and silverware rattling. If I would leave for a minute, I'd get back and my radio would be switched to a different station. It got to the point where I was terrified to come to work every night. I called my old coworker, told her what was going on, and she very calmly said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you about George." Apparently, George was a nurse/medical examiner who had a stroke and died while at work. He was in his 50s, I was told. From then on, everything actually went quite well. I introduced myself to George, asked him to please keep it down, and as long as I said hi to him as soon as I started work, he didn't seem to want to bother me anymore. It took us a little while to find a radio station we could agree on, but we worked harmoniously after that. When I left the job a year later, I made sure I told the girl that replaced me.